All right, once again, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rebecca Griffin, and I'm the Student Services and Admissions Officer at Southern College of Optometry. It is 4 o'clock on the dot, at least if you're in Central Time like we are, and we're going to go ahead and get started with the webinar. If you are having any trouble hearing me or seeing the presentation, we have the chat box live, so go ahead and write any concerns you have there. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy the presentation today, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the topic of today's webinar presentation is strengthening your application. And like I said, my name is Rebecca, so I'm pictured there on the screen. And today we were supposed to have our Director of Admissions and Enrollment Services, Mike Robertson, join us as the lead presenter, but unfortunately he is away due to an urgent medical concern, so we apologize that he can't be here. I regret that he won't be able to speak with you. He's a really charming and smart guy and has a lot to share, but I will go over the very same information that he intended to, so you should walk away with the same understanding. And of course, he's very happy to speak with any of you individually after the fact once he makes it back in the office. If you want to connect with him, feel free to do that. I can share his contact information with any of you who are interested in that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to go over information about the application process for Southern College of Optometry and specifically give you information on what it is we're looking for out of our applicants and what you should be doing to build the strongest application possible. To give you a little bit of perspective on what we hear as the most common questions related to the application process, take a look at these questions here. So we are often asked generally, what is SEO looking for? And not as often, but equally important, why are those things important? We are often asked about OAT and GPA scores. What does a student need to get? If I got this particular score, am I competitive? So on and so forth. Do I need to retake the OAT based on my score? We're often asked about prerequisite courses, what's necessary. If I took this particular biology class, will it count for one thing or the other? If I scored a C or a C- in my class, do I need to retake? We're also often asked about shadowing experience. What are we looking for? What's the minimum amount I should have before applying? And in addition to that, what other sorts of things do I need to be doing in terms of curricular and extracurricular activities to prepare for the application process? So these are some common questions that I hope throughout the presentation today will help to answer. Certainly you have your own questions, and as part of the webinar I am happy to answer whatever questions are on your mind currently. I tend to do so once I finish my general spiel, but go ahead and throughout the presentation use that question and answer box in GoToWebinar and type away your questions, and whether I pause and answer or wait till the end, I will be sure to provide a response to your individual questions. So please take advantage of that question box. To get started, I wanted to take a minute and briefly go over what it is our application process looks like. So these are the things that all of our applicants need to complete and be keeping in mind throughout the process. So I'm not sure if many of you are currently in undergrad, freshman, sophomore, and just starting to explore optometry schools, or if you're getting into your junior, senior years and starting the application process. Regardless, whatever the case is, this is important information to keep in mind. So first of all students have to take the optometry admissions test, commonly abbreviated as the OAT. And we'll talk about what scores you need to be striving for and when is the best time to take the OAT today. The application itself that you actually need to submit is done so through a program called Optomcast. Optomcast is a centralized application system that many optometry schools throughout the country utilize. And that is where we ask students to submit the majority of their admissions materials. That includes official transcripts, letters of reference, and so forth. The Optomcast program opens applications beginning in July 1, and that would be of the year preceding your enrollment. So for students who want to begin the SCO program in August of 2018, so in other words next fall, the application for those students opened already on July 1st of this year. So essentially you'll want to be working on your application process a year in advance of when you would begin school. And all students at SCO and many campuses start the optometry program in the fall. We do not have an enrollment period for spring. And so I mentioned a couple of things you need to complete in Optomcast to include your official transcript information, and that does need to come from all previous colleges attended. So even if a class shows up on your current university, your main university's transcript, you still do need to provide the official transcript from the place that you took the class. You also need to submit letters of reference, 2 letters of reference to be specific. Optomcast does allow you to submit up to 4 letters of reference, but SCO only requires 2. 1 letter of reference will need to come from an OD, an optometrist, that you've either shadowed or worked for and whom you're not related to. And the other letter should come from a pre-health advisor if you have a relationship with one, or from a professor that has taught you in one of your science classes. So 2 letters of reference. You can submit up to 4. It doesn't necessarily help you, but we would look at all letters of reference submitted if that's the case. We do take a look at a personal statement that you would write out and submit on Optomcast as well. And I'm often asked about what we're looking for in personal statements, and I want to encourage you all right now today not to stress about this aspect of the application. It is important, and we do look at this for each and every student, but by and large, we're not using the information that a student writes to make or break the situation regarding whether they're invited for an interview. Certainly the extremes, if a student has some really, some information about their credentials that they need to explain, they're lacking in one area or another, they can use that personal statement area to explain what's going on, and we do keep a lookout for any red flags. So, if writing skills are really not strong enough, if there are any troubling things said about a student's interest in optometry, we would certainly keep that in mind. But otherwise, the personal statement is really just used as a tool for us to get to know you a little bit more. We have the rest of your application to look at. We know what your credentials are. We know how you've done in school grade-wise based on your transcript information, so don't feel like you need to regurgitate those credentials. We want you to tell your story. Tell us why you're interested in optometry, why you're interested in SCO. Tell an anecdote or 2. And importantly, make sure that you proofread your essay, and if you have an English major as a friend, have them take a look at it too. So we couldn't tell you enough about all the cases where we've seen typos and other errors in the application that make us cringe a little bit. So definitely reread your essays and have a friend do it too. And then another big area of the application is the experiences section is what it's called, and that's where you would input all the information about shadowing hours that you've finished, experience in the field if you're working, a previous employment generally speaking, as well as extracurricular involvement in service work. So we do take a look at that very detailed information as well. That's all through Optomcast. SEO also requires a supplemental application, and this is a really quick bio page that you would submit. You find that on our website, and there's a small $50 application fee that goes along with that. And basically, the supplemental application is something that we see and flags us to pull your file off of Optomcast. It tells us that this particular student is interested in SEO specifically, especially considering that all optometry schools are able to see Optomcast information. We need to know who's looking at our school. So that supplemental application you could submit at the beginning of the cycle as well, July 1st. Our cycle goes through March, but generally speaking, and you'll hear me speak about this a lot more throughout the webinar today, the earlier you can apply, the better. And then the last part of the admissions process is an on-campus interview. We would invite you to come to campus for half of a day. You have a meeting with a professor, a closed file session where they don't have any of your credentials, nothing that you've submitted on Optomcast. They just have your name and your home state. So you get a chance to speak with them about yourself and help to paint the picture of who you are, why you're interested in optometry and SEO, and what you know about the field without their perspectives being colored by your scores on the OAT, your previous grades, etc. Also, as part of the interview, you meet with an admissions counselor like myself to go over what is in your file. You go on a tour of campus, and you meet previous and current students, and you learn more about financial aid and housing. So this is just a snapshot of the application process. Now let's take a look at what we consider to be a competitive applicant. And if there's anything you want to take away from the session today, it's what you see on the screen here. Screenshot it. Do whatever you got to do to keep these notes handy. First of all, we recommend taking the OAT early, and I'll show you a timeline in just a minute or two to submit your application early as well, and with that to submit all of your supporting documentation in a timely manner. Even if you've submitted your SEO supplemental application, your Optomcast information, it takes a little while to process, and we can't invite you for an interview until we see all of the different elements of your application together, including your letters of reference, so on and so forth. We do want students who are familiar with the profession, who have done some shadowing, who have spoken with ODs, who know a little bit about the field and about healthcare in general. What are the challenges? What are the issues in the field? What would a student encounter as they move through optometry program and into their own practice? We want to see a commitment to service. Service is a really key value here at Southern College of Optometry. We're invested in helping our community. We want our students to do the same. So we want to see that you have an active interest in service and that you've done some service work as a student. And we also encourage you to ask lots of questions. We are here as tools and resources for you. We want to help you get your application where it needs to be considered competitive, and you can reach us anytime with those kinds of questions. Let's look at these a little bit deeper. This is the profile of our 2017 entering class, so our students who have just started and are right now studying for their first set of midterms. This essentially gives you a snapshot of, statistically speaking, the middle of the road student for average competitiveness. We do enter a class of about 136 students every year. It is on the larger side if you look at that compared to other optometry schools throughout the country. But we still have pretty competitive statistics. Out of 821 students that apply, we accept 136. And the average scores for those students in terms of GPA are 3.56, and in terms of an OAT score, a 331. That last stat that you see there, 98.5% of students have obtained a bachelor's degree or higher. And we like to draw attention to this because it is true that we do not require a bachelor's degree. Our minimum requirement is 90 credit hours at the higher ed level, 30 of which need to be at a 4-year institution. However, we do strongly recommend completing your bachelor's degree, and it is almost essential in order to be considered competitive. We enter maybe 1 or 2 students a year that don't have a bachelor's degree, and in those cases, those are standout students who have top-notch OAT and GPA. So we know that even though they haven't completed their bachelor's degree, they're in a position to do well in our school. We have a lot of other information on our website about the students we enroll, who they are. We have demographic information. We have information about our board passage rates and graduation rates, and I really encourage you to take a look at that so you can get a sense of who the students are that we admit here at SCO and what we're looking for. All right, so I've mentioned this once or twice now. Hopefully you're picking up on a trend that one of the biggest and most important things that you can be doing to build the strongest application possible for those of you who are applying for future years is to get that application in as early as possible. And what does early mean? Well, I've given you a sample timeline here. So I mentioned before that you would start your application 1 year in advance of enrollment. The cycle is July 1 through the end of March. The best time to apply is right at the beginning of the cycle, and let's see why. So in the couple of years before you would enroll, essentially the last couple of years of your undergraduate degree, you're either going to be prepping for the application process or right there in it. So let's look at your junior year. Junior year, you need to be shadowing. Of course, you can be doing shadowing many years earlier, and we will factor those hours into your application. Your shadowing hours essentially don't expire, but certainly if you haven't started shadowing by your junior year, you want to start to do that right away. And so start shadowing junior year if you haven't already done that, and also start preparing for the OAT. We would hope that by your junior year you've finished a lot of the prerequisite courses that we require at SCO, because those are also going to help you for the OAT itself. So your general biologies, your general chemistries, and your general physics are certainly going to be included on the OAT. Organic chem is also a separate section. So you want to have taken those before you plan to take the OAT. And you certainly want to prepare for the OAT as best as possible. Don't blow it off, because every single optometry school that you might be considering applying to is really going to pay attention to your OAT scores. And one of the biggest reasons why is because statistically speaking, the students who do well on the OAT do well on their boards as well. So there is a real statistical correlation between students who do well on boards and those that pass. And we want our students to be able to pass their boards so that they can go on and practice optometry after they finish the program here. There are lots of guides and resources out there to help you do well on the OAT. There's practice tests that you can take. There's videos that you can watch online, and certainly books that you can buy. And we recommend talking to other students. Talk to students who have taken the OAT, especially those from your institution, because they can tell you, well, Organic 2 isn't required by a lot of optometry schools, but it was actually really helpful for me when I took the OAT. So they can give you feedback on that. So we recommend, in an ideal world, to take the OAT in the early summer of the year that you plan to apply. So you're getting ready to apply in July, take the OAT in May or June of that year. And while you're doing that, start working on your references. Reach out to the OD you want to request your reference from and the professor, to give them a heads up. Hey, I'm getting ready to submit this application. It will become available in July. And once that happens, I'll let you know that you can hop on and complete the letter of reference. But if you give them a heads up, they can be thinking about what they'll be saying, and it will take them a lot less time to go ahead and write that letter once the application system opens. So work on that over the summer, and then once OptomCast opens July 1, you can start that application. As soon as you have your OptomCast ID number, you can submit the SCO supplemental application, which is once again that quick bio page that we use to start your file. I recommend submitting that supplemental app as soon as you have your OptomCast ID, because we start the file and we start reaching out to you to give you feedback on your competitiveness at that time. So even if you haven't finished your OptomCast application, if we have your file, we can look and see your OAT scores and perhaps give you a recommendation as to whether or not you need to retake. We can start looking at other credentials, your shadowing hours, and so forth, and help you strengthen your application from that point moving forward. Then if you're finishing your OptomCast application, you're inputting your transcript information, your references are completing their part of the application, you're writing your essay, you're putting in your shadowing hours and so forth, and finishing that OptomCast application. As soon as that's verified, and OptomCast does take a little while to verify your file, so keep that in mind. But once everything is verified, that's when you could hear from us about an interview invitation. And we start interviewing students in mid-August, and we turn around admissions decisions really quickly. So if you come in for an interview at the end of August, you could hear back early September about your admission. And why early application is so important is twofold. One is because we have a rolling admissions process, and so we start accepting students right away, and we keep on accepting students until we fill our class. Now, we don't usually start getting to the bottom to, to fill our last few seats until February. But consider if you apply early, but we think that your say OAT score is a little bit below our competitive range, and we recommend that you retake the OAT. You have to wait a 90-day period between OAT tests. So if you sit for an OAT test and you decide you need to retake, you have to wait 90 days before you're able to. So by applying early, that gives you enough time to make any improvements in your application that the admissions committee might recommend, and still be considered for admission before we start to fill our class. So early application could mean that you get your acceptance really early, and or that you have plenty enough time to make any improvements to your application if required. The second big reason why an early application is important is related to finances. So we have a handful of really competitive scholarships in the range of $60,000 grants over the course of your 4 years. And we also have a handful of contract seats for regional tuition for a handful of states near Tennessee that don't themselves have optometry schools. And both scholarships and contract seats are awarded on a rolling basis as well. And so we start giving those out to the most competitive students mid-August, early September, and we keep giving them out until those are gone. And we usually give out our contract seats and scholarships far earlier than we finalize our class list. So early application, guys, is the biggest piece of advice that we can offer. And what are we looking for in OAT and GPA? Probably the most common question that we get here in the admissions office. We do not have hard minimum scores for acceptance in terms of both OAT and GPA, but we often do talk about our competitive ranges. And just as a reminder, our average scores for this incoming class were a 3.56 GPA and a 331 OAT. However, for students who aren't above the minimum, what is competitive, we usually say that a 320 or above for OAT is competitive, and that is out of a score of 400, and that you might be recommended to retake if you score a 310 or below. Every year we do admit a few students who are at the 300 or 310 level. Generally those are students who have a stronger GPA or stronger credentials otherwise. So it doesn't mean that you can't get admitted if you don't score a 320 or above, but we would need to see other aspects of your application being quite excellent in order to do that. In terms of GPA, we consider competitive range to be a 3.0 or above. And your prerequisite GPA as well, we will want to see above a 3.0. And so, as I alluded to, it's generally considered a sliding scale. So if your GPA is higher, but your OAT was a little bit lower, you could still be in the competitive range and vice versa. So what we recommend for the OAT, we are often asked, you know, if I take the test multiple times, what score do you look at, so on and so forth. And we would look at the score that has the highest academic average. We do look at all scores, though. So some students said that they took the test just to kind of see what it was like. They didn't really prepare, but they wanted to have a go at it once so they know what it's like, and then they prepare and plan to take it a second time. And that's not what we recommend. We don't recommend taking the OAT as a practice because we will see all of the scores, so there's no way to hide certain scores from schools and have your other ones reported. So don't take it for practice. Do the planning and prep you need to do as well as possible the first time around. We don't necessarily penalize a student who has taken the OAT multiple times. So don't be afraid if you didn't do as well as you would have liked to the first time and you plan to retake. If you can get your score up, we certainly will still consider that. And let's talk about prerequisite courses at the same time. And so students often write to say, I got this grade in my biochem class, I got a C- and statistics, so on and so forth. Do I need to retake? Generally, our advice is that you must pass the class, and we want to know that you learn the material. So even if you didn't score as hot, maybe you were sick when you took one of the big exams, but you feel like you learned the material, we would accept a class that you earned a C- in. The most important thing is that you have the knowledge that you need in your head to do well on the OAT, and of course to do well in the program here at SEO. We don't require classes that aren't going to come into play in the program here, and so you need to be able to retain the material that you learn in your prerequisite courses and have that carry over to when you start the program here. And we would, of course, look at how you did in that particular section of the OAT. So you didn't do as hot in your organic chemistry class, but you did fine on the organic chemistry section of the OAT. That is enough to satisfy us, generally speaking. And in terms of OAT, one thing I intended to mention is that the OAT test has several sections. So there's a biology, a chem, an organic chem section, as well as physics, reading comprehension, and quantitative reasoning. And you get a sub-score in all of those, as well as a total science score and an overall average. So we mainly look at your overall average, but we don't ignore your sub-scores at the same time. And we want to see a pretty consistent score throughout. So we want to see all of your scores above a 300 in an ideal world, and as close to your academic average and as close to our competitive range as possible. So don't blow off one particular section. Even if you're a biology major, do still review your biology notes, because if it's been a few years or a couple of years since you took your intro level biologies, which is mainly what's tested on, you want to make sure you review and refresh your memory on that. The last note here, feedback from admissions office provided throughout the process, is something I want you to be aware of. That we are here to provide feedback, and that if you submit an application, we start a file, and your GPA is slightly below our competitive range, your OAT score, your shadowing hours aren't quite where we would want them to be, we're not going to reject your application immediately. We'll keep your file open, and we'll communicate to you what it is that we need you to improve on and give you the opportunity to do that. So we want to be there for you so you can improve and get where you need to be. We're not going to close your file immediately. But it is up to you to take that advice, whatever it is we want you to do, and communicate to us once you've done that. So if we've asked you to get shadowing in another setting, make sure to contact us and say, hey guys, I just went to Dr. Kerr's office like you suggested, and can you please update my application with that information? And once we hear back from you, the admissions office would consider, again, the state of your application and whether you're now a competitive applicant to bring in for an interview. Let's talk a little bit more about shadowing. So another common question we get, how much shadowing do I need to have before I apply? There's no minimum requirement for shadowing hours. Generally, we recommend a minimum of 30 to 45 hours. One of the most important things to keep in mind is that we want to see diversity within your shadowing hours. So if you spent all of your time at a private practice, that's great experience, but we want you to see how other doctors do things and how different optometry settings handle practice. So private practice is a common mode for optometrists, but there's also commercial practices like Pearl Vision, so forth. There are institutional practices. Optometrists work in hospital settings and VAs. And there are unique settings like co-management offices where ophthalmologists, who are medical doctors that focus and specialize in eye care, and optometrists co-manage the same patient together. So if you have shadowing, but you don't have diversity, that's not going to be up to snuff. We generally recommend at least 3 different modes of practice, at least 2 to 3. Even for students who have 500, 700 hours of shadowing or work experience, because they've been working part-time for the last couple years, but they've only been at one practice, we still reach out and say that they need to get experience even one day, 5 hours, 8 hours in another office so they can see how different doctors do things differently. And we've heard great feedback from students who say, hey, thanks for making that recommendation. I thought I had really good experience because I've been working in the field, but I didn't understand how doctors truly do things differently. So that's one really important thing to keep in mind. If you don't know how to go about getting shadowing hours in, start with your own optometrist. Reach out to them, see if you can go in and shadow them for a day, and then ask them if they can refer you to other doctors and other practices. It's not enough to have your own appointment at your optometrist. That's not truly shadowing because you don't see all the other things that a doctor does to care for a patient behind the scenes. You really need to be there throughout the entire experience, and at least a day is generally a good starting point at one particular place. And then we also want you to experience and learn about the field in other ways. So do your research online, read professional journals, talk to your optometrist about the field, not just about their daily work. You might hear, or you might continue to hear about how optometry is a really legislated profession, and that's important to know. Optometry is not practiced the same from state to state across the country, and that's because of legislation in place. State legislatures get to decide what the scope of practice of optometrists in their state is, what an optometrist is and is not allowed to do. So you want to learn about that before you start school and before you think about where you want to ultimately practice. And you want to know what that means. So as an example, things that are legislated are whether optometrists can do laser procedures, injections, right, prescription medications, so on and so forth. And just a quick note that Tennessee has a pretty wide scope of practice. The only thing that optometrists can't do in Tennessee are laser procedures, but our students still learn how to do those procedures in the lab and practice on I think sheep eyes and see those procedures performed in our clinic as well. So they learn how to do those skills, and you want to know whether the schools that you are going to teach those skills, even if it's not within the scope of practice of doctors in that area. And generally, try to learn more about the state of healthcare in general. What are the major issues? What are the challenges? These are things that are important for you to know and that you're going to be called on to speak more to in the interview process. And last but not least, one aspect of the application is your extracurricular and service experience. And what we're looking for here is to see how you have pursued your interests, how you have balanced workload and been able to manage a busy schedule. We want to know that you have lots on your plate and that you can navigate through that without many challenges, that you have willingness to make sacrifices in the discipline you need to be successful in the program, and experience with high pressure situations. These are all really important considering the nature of the field. You're going to have to balance a lot of responsibility as an optometrist. You're going to face high pressure situations with real live people. You have people's lives in your hands. And also because the SCO program in optometry school in general is pretty tough. You have to balance a very intense load. In your first semester, you take 24, 25 credit hours. You're in clinic. Throughout the experience here at SCO, you see over 3,000 patients. And we want to know that you are going to approach the program with the discipline, the drive, and the attitude you need not to get burnt out and to continue through and succeed in the program and beyond as a doctor. So we want to know that you are in a position to be able to handle the intense pressure and all the time that comes along with it. With the curriculum and the course load, there may be times where you have to make sacrifices. You may not be able to attend your second cousin's friend's wedding if you have an exam or a required event that day. So we want to know that you're going to put the program as one of your very top priorities and that you are willing to make sacrifices if necessary. We want to know that you're committed to the field, that you're not going to bow away based on the intense pressure you may face. We also want to know that you're committed to service. The field itself is all about serving your community, serving your population, and our school in particular has a really strong value for service. We want to give back to the Memphis community here. Our school actually gives away over $1 million in free eye care to the community every year, and we want to know that you're going to take that on with the right attitude and willingness to do that and work with various populations and diverse populations. Basically, you want to show that you can be a good citizen and a good role model. This doesn't mean that all of your experience has to focus on optometry. If you're really interested in jiu-jitsu or you are a musician, whatever the case, we just want to see that you pursue your interests, whatever it is that you are driven to do as an undergraduate student, and that you can handle an intense class load at the same time. And then lastly, a quick note about professionalism. This is really important. We speak with a lot of students every year. We review a lot of applications. And we want to know that students coming through are going to be professional with the patients they interact with the faculty that they are taking classes with here at SCO, and with fellow students and staff members. So just a couple quick tips. Whenever you're emailing or contacting our office, just use appropriate etiquette, appropriate greetings, no slang, so on and so forth. Treat this as if it's a job. How would you speak in a work setting with colleagues? One important thing, a good tip to keep in mind is whenever you have questions, do a quick search on our website to see if the answer to your question is there before you reach out to our office. It is not because we don't want to hear from you and that we're not willing to answer your questions, but it just demonstrates your willingness to do a little bit of research and take initiative. And we know what's on our website, so if you reach out to us with a question that could be answered with a quick click into our website, it's something that we will notice and make note of. And similarly, allow a reasonable amount of time for admissions to respond to inquiries. We have a very fast-paced and high load here. We want to get back to you, and we strive to get back to you within 24 hours, and usually a lot sooner, but don't fear if we don't get back with you immediately. I know it's the type of world we live in with text messaging and social media and all that. We're used to communicating really quickly, but keep in mind that we have a lot going on in our days, and we will get back with you as soon as possible. And ask lots of questions, but ask pertinent questions, professional questions, but do take advantage of our staff here when you do have questions on your mind. So, folks, that brings us to the end. I want to thank you for being here, and a quick shameless plug that we have a couple other events coming up soon. Health Professions Week is in early November, and as part of that, we're hosting a student panel. This is going to be on GoToWebinar, this platform here. You can pop in and out anytime, though, throughout those 2 hours, and essentially we would have you chat whatever questions you have into the chat box. I'm going to moderate and pose whatever questions you have to our students who will be on the line. So it's your chance to hear from current students. You can ask them questions about the OAT, you can ask them questions about the application process, about why they chose SEO, and of course you can ask them questions about what the experience is like as an SEO student, what the program is like. We'll also have a webinar for those of you who are looking at SEO and wondering, well, what the heck does the program include? What am I going to be studying over the course of the 4 years? We'll have a curriculum webinar on November 9th. It's going to be led by our Director of Academic Services, Dr. Lindsay Elkins, and I encourage you to tune into that. And also keep in mind that we record all of our webinars and we post those on our website. So if you aren't able to attend one of our sessions, you can always refer back to the link you see here on the screen. For instance, our September webinar was on interview skills with Mr. Hauser, our Vice President of Student Services, and that recording is already up and live on YouTube. You can access the link through this website here. Any questions you have, feel free to give me a holler. My contact information is there. And once again, I apologize that Mr. Robertson wasn't able to be here. He would have if he could have, but he really didn't have a choice due to the circumstances. And he would be happy to chat with any of you who want another perspective on the topics today. So with that, let's open it up for questions. I have a couple here. Let's see what you guys have on your minds. A good question. I'm working full-time and I've taken 2 online prerequisite courses with real-life labs. Would SEO accept these credits? The answer to that question is yes. We do accept online courses. We do strongly recommend that classes be taken on campus and especially labs, but we do accept online classes, and it's great that the labs, in the case of the student, were taken in the classroom. And then the next question, let's see here. So the SEO website lists tuition for partner states, but it doesn't show in-state tuition. What is the current tuition for Tennessee residents? And so the website, it does list non-regional tuition, which is generally what students pay if they're not from a regional state. And it's about $39,000 and some change. It lists regional tuition for all contract states except for Tennessee, and because that is still up in the air for the current year, generally Tennessee residents who get a contract seat have a grant of at least $10,000 per year. So our non-regional tuition would be decreased by about $10,000 per year for Tennessee students on a general basis. One quick note about contract seats is that we have only limited numbers of contract seats, which would allow students to get regional tuition from the applicable state. So again, those are a competitive sort of thing that we would review and offer to you as part of the admissions process. Great question. Any other questions out there? I'll give it another couple seconds for y'all to take your questions. Any last questions? Going once. Going twice. Here we go. Okay, a good question. What is the latest we would hear back from SEO if we were accepted? So I mentioned that we do turn around feedback about your interview pretty quickly. So generally, if you come in for an interview, you hear back some sort of feedback within about a week. If you're accepted, then you get some time to think it over. We give you a good amount of time, 8 weeks, just in case you have other interviews and things you need to do to make sure you choose the school you want to and that you feel is the best fit. So you could get feedback, or you should get feedback within about a week. If you're not accepted, it could be a couple different things. You could be put on hold, which means we want to be able to see more of our applicant pool before we give you an answer. If you're put on hold, you would generally hear back toward, by the end of our cycle, so January, February, if not sooner. And generally, if we're putting you on hold, we're giving you information about how you can improve. So we ask you to take another class. We ask you to do some more shadowing hours, or in some cases, we ask you to try the OAT again. And if you are making improvements in your application and communicating those to us, we would make a decision much sooner than that, generally, again, within a week of when you inform us of those improvements. Our cycle ends in March. We're generally filling our seats in February. So if you don't get a spot, you're applying a little bit later on, or you're put on hold. Our alternate list would be started in about February. An alternate list meaning we filled our seats, but if students withdraw, we would move to those students on the alternate list to consider. So by and large, the majority of the time, students are getting feedback within a week. It's not often that students are put on hold, and generally only if we have feedback to give you about how to improve. All right, great question. Another one came through about official campus visit days for prospective applicants this fall, spring. Generally, we do individual appointments, and we can coordinate those more or less anytime you're interested in coming to visit, and that's probably the best thing that you can do. It allows you to have individualized attention. You'd have a counseling appointment with someone in the admissions office, and then you'd go on a tour with one of our current students, and so you'd be spending about 2 hours or so on campus, and we give you information about where you can stay if you're traveling from afar and need to camp up in a hotel. We occasionally do bigger events for prospective applicants. We would reach out to you with an invitation if we were inviting students to come from your school. It is sometimes on a school-by-school basis. And so near to that same link that I have on the screen here, events for current students would give you the full list. We don't have any on the schedule today for prospective applicants in fall, spring, but that's where we would post, and we would absolutely let you know. We'd send out another email about any events that you would be eligible to attend. We also do a lot of campus visits, so our recruiters go out to see students on their home campuses, and we do webinars as well. So similarly, if you're at a school that we're visiting or doing a webinar for, you'd get an email. So best piece of advice, just to keep an eye out on your email, and we'll certainly keep you in the loop if there's anything we're doing that we want you to be able to take advantage of as a prospective student. All right, any other questions? Great questions. Going once. Going twice. All right, I think we'll wrap up here. Do email me. I check the admissions at sco.edu account every day. Any questions that pop up, shoot me a message or give us a call. Thanks again for being here. I hope you tune in to the student panel and the next webinar in November, and keep an eye out in your email for other events coming up. Thanks once again, guys, and have a great night.